Ni känner igen mig, jag heter Robert Eriksson, arbetar med investerarkontakter och mediekontakter för ett antal av bolagen i Lundinsfären. Och som sagt var det roligt att så många är här. Det hade varit ännu roligare om vi hade haft högre aktiekurser och mindre tråkiga råvarumarknader förstås. Men jag tror att vi kommer få höra en hel del om det här idag. Om vår syn på oljemarknaden och hur vi gör för att bäst hantera Africa Oil under de här tuffa tiderna. Så med det så, innan jag lämnar över så ska jag säga att efter presentationen så kommer det finnas förtäring och dryck här utanför. Så with that I would like to leave over to Keith Hill, who's the CEO of Africa Oil.
All right, well, everyone, thanks for coming again. Good to see some familiar faces. Good to see a few smiling faces out there. These are tough times, and unfortunately, I'm old enough that this is the fourth time I've been through this. I've seen $8 oil before, and I've seen it for the same reason I think we're seeing it right now. I think basically the Saudis are trying to teach the rest of the world a lesson that they can control the price of oil when they want to, and they want more market share. So it's been very interesting. This is my fourth day on the road. I spent 2 days in London earlier this week. I spent a day in Copenhagen last week at the SEB conference. And I can tell you the New World Order, things have changed completely. Nobody wants to hear about exploration prospects anymore. Nobody wants to hear about how big of volumes we're going to find. All they want to hear about is, are we going to survive? And when we're in rooms with other companies, they ask them, instead of asking them, what type of drilling are you planning this year? They say, not only what is your current debt situation, but who is that debt to? What are your covenants? What is the oil price in your debt? And it seems like nobody cares about anything else in the oil industry this day. So I learned very quickly in this roadshow, right when investors walked in, I said two things. I said, we have no debt. And they relaxed a little. And we have almost 100% discretionary spend this year. And they all relaxed, and then we actually had a conversation. So I think, having been in this before, there's I think we need to talk a little bit about oil prices. I can tell you every investor meeting I've been in the last few days, we spend more than half of the meeting talking about oil prices. And it's nice for me because I get to talk to some of the smartest guys in the world who sit and think about oil prices all day long, and that's all they do. Some of the big banks, the oil analysts. And the one thing I heard from everybody is nobody saw this coming. Other markets, people have seen this in dire predictions and things like that, but I can tell you no one saw that this price was coming. I remember coming back here and people were saying oil was down to $90, and I said, well, it can't stay there. It's got to go right back up. It's going to be 100, and I think that's basically everybody thought. Everybody thought $100 oil was here to stay forever. I can tell you the other thing is that every single person I talk to says oil is going to come back up to reasonable levels. I don't think there's anybody that thinks today's oil price is sustainable. It's going to come back up. The two big questions are, when is it going to come back, and how high is it going to come? So there we start seeing some divisions. And there are only two really fundamental things in this market. No matter what you read about conspiracy theories in the United States and others, there's a slight oversupply of oil right now, primarily due to U.S. shale. And that's the first thing that's going to happen before we see the bottom. And honestly, that's the biggest concern of everybody I talk to is where is the floor of oil price? I would have said 3 weeks ago, 60 is definitely the floor. I would have said 10 days ago, 50. It may hit 50, but it's never going to go below 50. Now it's 40. I can't get below 40. But I think the problem is nobody understands where that floor is. And one guy I like the analogy of is we're out there treading water in this shark-infested sea, and we can't feel the bottom. We can see there's an island there, and we know we're probably going to get to safety, but until we actually feel that ground under our feet and start walking up the shore, nobody's going to be certain about anything. And I think right now that's where the market is. It's you saw copper prices came down today. Companies like Barrick lost 13% of the market cap. Lundin Mining down So that's the first thing we need. We need to get the bottom. I think the bottom is going to be when that flush production from the shale oil comes off and that little glut of supply is out of the market. And at that point, I think we're going to see the bottom. I don't know where that bottom is, but at least we're going to see it, and from there we can start moving up. I think the other question is, how long is this going to last? You know, again, I can tell you what the consensus is. The consensus is the second quarter is when we're going to see the bottom. The third quarter is when we're going to start seeing some recovery. And the fourth quarter is going to be when we will see full recovery to whatever the new oil price is. So the last question is, what is the new oil price? And again, I'm spouting words as if they're my own, but I'm just telling you what I've been hearing from other people is they believe the Saudis have realized that $100 oil may not be in their best interest. You know, what happens in $100 oil, all of a sudden the shale guys start coming in, all of a sudden the deep water guys start coming in, and it just opens up too much market to people. So you read a lot about, you know, what's motivating the Saudis now. It's 100% market share. And the Saudis can produce oil for $20 a barrel. So that's what gets a lot of people nervous. Can they really get out there and just drive the price of oil down to $20 and stay there? Well, the answer is they really can't. To keep their economy going, they need about $80 to $90 a barrel. So they've got, by some accounts, about $750 billion of cash in the bank that they've accumulated over these last 4 nice years of $100 oil. And they will subsidize their basically social spending by that money. But if you start working out the math, that's $40 or $50 billion a month they're going to have to spend to keep their people happy. So after about 6 months of $50 billion, that's about half of their money in the bank. And I think, you know, I think that's the consensus. It can't last more than 6 months. So I think most people think that it's going to recover. It's going to hit bottom in the second quarter. It's going to recover a bit in the third quarter. It's going to reach the potential at the end of the year, but it's probably not going to be $100 oil. It's probably going to be $75, $80 oil, which is good enough for them to run their businesses or their country on, but not enough to encourage some of these guys to get back in. So the good news is we're very happy with $80, $75, $80 oil. We are one of the lowest cost producers in the world once we get on. So you know, the shale guys and the deep water guys may not survive, but we will. So I think, you know, this year is not going to be as nice a year as we all hoped. We're not going to be able to do as much as we hope, but we're going to be very fiscally conservative this year. Every dollar that we have in the bank, we do have a fairly good balance in the bank right now. It should see us to the middle of the year. Anything that we spend beyond that, we would have to go raise in the market. And these are very expensive dollars to raise in the market now, about 3 times as expensive as we raised last time. So we better be damn sure that whatever we elect to raise in the market is going to add value. And we'll go through at the end of the presentation. I'll show you kind of where we are and what our plans are. And then we'll talk a little bit about what things we should be doing, what things we shouldn't be doing, and how much they're going to cost. But really, I think hopefully some of you are fight fans. I still think the best boxing match ever was the Ali Foreman Rumble in the Jungle. So again, I'll put ourselves as Muhammad Ali. That you know, we're here basically doing the rope-a-dope. If you remember, for 7 rounds, Muhammad Ali went up against the rope. Everybody beat him. George Foreman beat him. And that's basically where we are right now. We're getting beat by oil prices. We're also getting beat from the Kenyan government, putting capital gains tax on us. We're getting beat by some dry holes in some of our new basin openers. You know, and the thing is, we're in the mode now where we just got to stay up against the ropes, and we got to take these blows. But I can tell you, you know, it has been a difficult year. We're not suffering alone. Everybody is suffering along with us. We suffered more early on. If you look at our share price, we dropped really from August to October, and we dropped, you know, well below what the market average was. Since then, a guy just pointed out to me, and it's a very shallow consolation, that we're probably one of the top performers in the last 60 days in the TSX venture and the Stockholm market. That doesn't make me feel better. You know, from where we were, that's a very small consolation. Again, I think not only did the Kenyan government go against us, but there are some good things about oil prices. it's hard to imagine that there could be, but the one thing it will do is it will focus the Kenyan government. You know, I've been spending a lot of time working with the Kenyan government, and I think convincing them that their capital gains tax was excessive and poorly timed. And I think we are getting quite a few people agreeing with that. And I think if you look in the Kenyan papers, there's a big push to either reduce or even repeal that capital gains tax. So I think low oil prices are going to help them make that decision. Everybody's stopping spending money, including us in the country. We're cutting back dramatically. And if they want to attract direct foreign investment, they're going to have to lower that. The other thing is our contractors. So the contractors that basically jack up their prices and put the screws to us in high oil prices, now it's our time to come back and turn the tables on that. So we're going back to all of our contractors and basically saying, okay, boys, it's time to start thinking about a 30 to 40% reduction in your prices if you want to keep working for us. And they're lining up for that. If you think it's tough on us, it's tougher on the service guys. There's going to be so many rigs stacked. Last week they stacked 61 rigs in the United States, and I think you're going to see that trend continue for some time. Deepwater rigs, which you could barely get on a 3-year lease for 700,000 to 800,000 barrels a day a couple of years ago, they're offering them for one-offs for $350,000 a day. So, you know, one good thing about the price correction is you can also correct the costs. And the last one is really about G&A. If you've swollen up your organization and you've got a very high G&A, this is a great opportunity to cut. You know, we are a very lean group at Africa Oil, but our operator has a fairly big operation, a fairly expensive one. You may have seen in the papers. Tullow is talking about a 30 to 40% reduction in staff, and again, putting down the cost to a more reasonable level. So I think that you know, it's not all bad news, and you know, the single most important thing to remember is we have a great asset. The Lokochar Basin is admittedly one of the best in the world. The IEA came out last week with the 3 top areas in the world where oil growth is expected. Number 1 was deepwater Brazil, Campos Basin. Number 2 was Canadian heavy oil sands. And number 3 was onshore East African rift basins. So you could argue now that number 1 and number 2 are no longer economically viable. So that would potentially say we do have the best acreage position in the world. So the value of our asset hasn't changed. The only value is the market's perception of our asset in current market conditions. And really what we're going to be doing this year, we're going to be spending time firming up that asset. You know, at the end of the day, this is where our big value is. This is where our lowest risk way to grow the company is, and this is what we're going to be spending our time and money on. We also need to finalize the pipeline. At the end of the day, monetizing this is directly dependent on the pipeline and getting a pipeline route set up and agreed with the partners in the host governments. And I think we're actually making pretty good progress on that. We do still have great exploration potential. In a market where dollars are very expensive, we may have to defer some of our basin opening wells, which are quite a bit more expensive than our appraisal wells, but we will still get after them. So we'll go through that. There are 2 wells we're drilling now, and there's 1 or 2 wells we think probably is going to be a good investment even in today's market. But you will see funding shift from our exploration new basin openers to basically going into the area where we've proven the Lokochar Basin. So again, the Lokochar Basin, we've had a great success rate. We drilled 7 discoveries in a row. The main 5 along this rift, the side of the basin, are going to be where we really open up this basin. This will be the funding for development. We have a couple on this side. We've got Ewoy, Eton, which actually looks quite interesting to me. Even though it only had a small amount of pay, it had some of the best sand shows throughout, and I think because of that, we've expanded this 3D seismic to cover this northern part of the block. We've now acquired all of this seismic. In fact, we stood down all of our seismic crews in Kenya. We won't be shooting any more seismic in Kenya. So that's a $70 to $90 million expenditure we've had. And that had nothing to do with oil prices. We've decided to do that long before because basically we've got enough seismic. We have all the seismic we need. So again, I'll apologize once again. I can't help showing seismic. I'm a geologist, geophysicist, and to me, this is beautiful stuff. I know for a lot of people it's squiggly lines that make no sense, but this is like a cross-section of the earth. This is the basin bounding fault. Even the non-geologists can see this. It's kind of ratty in here. This is the line we actually drilled on for Gamma. This is a 2D seismic line we discovered Gamma with. And you can see you can map a couple of faults in here, but it's pretty poorly put together. This is the same exact line now from the 3D survey. And even the non-geologists can see how continuous these reflectors are. In fact, the whole structure has changed. It's a rollover anticline into that fault. And you can start seeing these well-defined fault blocks within the reservoir. So this is going to give us a lot of confidence on how to map the structures. But above and beyond that, many of you have read our press release and say, well, we've hit this rift edge facies that's not very good quality. Before 3D, we kind of just had to stay away from the fault. Now we actually can predict where it is. And again, I know you're not geophysicists, but you can see in the basement here how fuzzy and kind of distorted, almost static-y this looks, compared to stuff like this where you can see good reflectors. These are sands and shales. These are reservoirs and source rocks. This area here is very static, and we can actually start mapping out this rift edge basin facies. So we proved that in Twiga. We drilled a well in Twiga, up dip from one of our best reservoir wells, had almost zero reservoir. In fact, even to the point where we're thinking maybe we have to write off the whole structure. But fortunately, we were able to convince ourselves and our operator that we should sidetrack that well down dip. So we sidetracked it, hit these nice reflectors, have some of the best reservoirs we've ever seen. This distance from here to here is only 150 meters. So we move 150 meters away, we go from zero reservoir to very good reservoir. So this is a very powerful tool, and of course, what we're going to do with it. Some of you remember Twiga was our second discovery. Now this is looking like a nice discovery that's going to grow. Ecalis was one that we really liked. I think for those of you who've been coming out all these years, I think the Ecalis well was one we thought was going to be one of our best. Beautiful structure right in the heart of the source kitchen. We drilled it, we only had 30 meters in that peg. Very disappointing. We come back now though, and we look at the 3D and we understand why. Once again, you see this rift basin edge facies. We hit a sand here. This is the single best sand we've ever seen in the basin. 13 Darcy's of permeability. This is like Johann Sverdrup that Lundin Petroleum has offshore. But then we went directly into this lousy reservoir facies, and most of the Awewer sands, which is kind of this green down to through the blue, is a terrible reservoir. So now with this tool, we are playing. This is one of the firm wells we're going to be drilling. We're going to be drilling this well, and we're going to be going down dip through the section, all in this good area, down dip from this great reservoir we've seen, and all of this should be in good reservoir facies. So if we can prove this field could be actually as bigger than Gamia or Amazing. So this is going to be a very interesting well. It also is going to go test a concept I'll talk about in a minute. Remember this, the Lacone shale play. There's a sand down here, this big bright reflector that we think is kind of a non-traditional a resource play in the center of this basin. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So now we can actually map this field quite well. So the Gamia field, now we have a very competent map where it used to look like a big blob. We're actually be able to map these faults with confidence. We've actually identified a new lobe out here that we've never classified before, which could have 50 to 100 million barrels of potential in it. A new prospect down here we're calling Amazing South, which again, 100 to 150 million barrel type prospectivity, which we've never seen on the seismic before. The new 3D is really going to help us map these things and to stay away from that lousy reservoir facies. So I think it's a great tool. I think you'll see us applying that. This is kind of the whole southern trend with Gamia, Amazing, and our Kosawan well where we did see that rift edge facies. Now we can map basically a transition zone of that rift edge facies, and we think we can come down here and drill some wells here that could have some big volumes. So we think there's a very good chance we'll be growing reservoirs just by drilling here. This again, and I won't dwell on it, but this is that not unconventional play I talked about. We've already hit it once in the Twiga well, we've hit it once in the Atuco well, and the Ecalis deep well is going to go right into the heart of this amplitude. So there's and we think it's a sand that's surrounded by the main source rock, the Cone Shale. So the Cone Shale is really the reason this basin is as good as it is. It's 400 to 600 meters thick with beautiful organic rich shale pumping out hydrocarbons today. So the idea is if we've got a sand in the middle of that, it'll act as a conduit and drain the oil out of that source rock. And really that's all these, when you talk about the Bakken, when you talk about unconventional, that's all you're doing. You're basically just going to the source rock and either through fractures or sand, draining the oil directly from the source rock instead of waiting for it to migrate into a reservoir. So the reason these are big is, interesting, is they're so big. You know, this is billions and billions of barrels in place. And even if you only get a few percent of it, it's still an awful lot of oil. And this is the thing that's fueling the big shale revolution in the United States. So again, this year, spending a lot of time and very focused on the Lokochar Basin. Not only have we finished our 3D, we have potentially all of these appraisal wells planned. Excuse me. We also have some wells in the north, Etam North. If the 3D comes out as good as we hope, as good as it did in the south, I think we'll be looking to drill at least 1 or 2 wells in the Etam area as well. So we haven't landed on all of this. Right now, the 3D, we've just got this part of it here processed. We still need to clean up some of this data with some additional processing, but I think it's going to be a very powerful tool to help us explore the basin. So again, the goal here is to grow resources. And you see, I think we've done quite well going from 56 to 368 to 616 over the last 3 years. We still have 675 million barrels of 3C, which is basically the reason it's not 2C, and again, we throw these numbers around. 2C is contingent resources. 3C is prospective resources. And what we need to do is convert those prospective 3C resources into contingent resources. And the reason we do that is because once we have a pipeline, once we have a development plan, those turn into proven and probable reserves. So that's what people are going to pay us for. At the end of the day, if somebody buys our company or farms into our acreage, this is what they pay for. Proven and probable reserves, or contingent resources that they believe are going to become proven and probable reserves as soon as the pipeline's done. So if you take this number here, this 675, about half of this is still classified as prospective because we haven't drilled enough wells from an aerial standpoint to reclassify that into proven into 2C. The other half has to do with reservoir issues. We haven't proven to our reserve auditors that the reservoir is good enough to get the recovery factories we're telling them that we think it will get. So that is probably, if you distill down this program this year, the majority of what we're doing is trying to convert this into that. And if we just convert half of this, we're at that billion barrel mark that we've always told you we think is in this basin. So that's what our goal is. By the end of this year, I want to be able to come back to you and say, we've got that billion barrels that I've always told you about. And again, recovery factor is one of the biggest things of that. And again, I won't get too technical here, but if you look at what our reserve auditor does is give us a range of recovery factors. They put a low case of 16, a mid case of 26, and a high case of 36. So if you look around the world, these are the 30 fields that we think are geologically similar to us, including the 3 that we think are the most geologically similar in Sudan, Rajasthan, and Uganda. So those fields get about 33 to 35% recovery factor. So what you see is in the low case, they've given us a recovery factor lower than the worst possible field we can find on Earth in this type of similar geology with similar oil. In the mid case, we're still probably more like the P80 case at 26. And in the upper case, they're still well below where we think the upper sands on this would be for recovery factor. They don't do this because they're evil people. They do this because we haven't given enough hard data to convince them that we should be using this number. So the 2 pieces of hard data that we can use to convince them, number 1, are extended well tests. So right now, these are all the wells we drilled in Gambia. We've got these 3 wells slated to do an extended well test. And what the extended well test basically is you put this well on production and you monitor it at the 2 wells nearby. So if these sands are interconnected, if you produce at one well, you should see a pressure response at the wells nearby. And that proves to our reserve auditors, yeah, these are good, well interconnected sands. They're not small little isolated ponds. Then what you do is do an injectivity test. You inject water into the main well, and you see the pressure response should increase at the two neighboring wells. That tells the reserve auditor that water flood should work here, and therefore we should have a higher recovery factor. So we're doing the one in Amosing right now. We're getting ready in the second quarter to do Gamia, and I think this will be a big driver for moving our reserve auditors to reclassify. And again, a 10% increase in the recovery factor could be as much as a 300 to 400 million barrel increase in our recoverable reserves. So that's the real goal this year. The other thing we can do, and the good news is this is quite cheap, is core analysis. At the end of the day, the core is the only hard data that we really have in this whole adventure. You know, we can do log analysis, which is basically an interpretive thing of looking at electrical logs. We can do DST analysis. We can even do analysis that says what we're getting on the extended well test. But this is actually hard data. You know, rock data is the one piece of hard data that you can use to really calibrate what the rock properties are. And we have 1,100 meters of it. We've been taking core in every well since the first couple of discovery wells. So we have 1,100 meters of core to analyze, and we're working through that. So the key elements we want to get out of this, again, are things about saturations, oil saturations, permeability, and we can actually do two different ways of getting recovery factors. They're called relative permeability tests and capillary pressure tests. Actually will tell us what type of recovery factors we can expect from this, physically from this rock. So these are going to be very important piece of data for us. We have seen some early data from a saturation standpoint. It looks like the 33% that we've given to our reserve auditor, it looks like it's going to be confirmed. And that's important because we've had discussions with a few big oil companies, and they look at our logs and say, well, it could be 70% water saturation, which is a bit ridiculous. I mean, 70% water saturation rock wouldn't produce oil. But now we've got the hard data to say, well, that can't be. We've got the core data. We've seen a couple of, our first data is coming out on rel perm, which suggests that there was 60% recovery factor. Now, I'm a geologist. I used to go to these core labs. If there's all this core laid on the table, you always look and see, oh, there's the very best one there. You go over and pick that out and you say, run a plug there. So I would say that 60% represents probably the best rock that's out there. We need a statistical distribution of not just the best, but the medium, and even the low case, and understand that reservoir. But we should be able to have that this year. So I think this is one of the key things we need to do this year as well. And then the pipeline. The pipeline, I think we're getting close on this. We're seeing alignment. The Uganda partners last year came up with the idea that there should be a southern route, and this is the Uganda partners' preferred route. Us and the government of Kenya have always kind of preferred this northern route. There are a few issues that make the southern route interesting. There is an existing pipeline there that we can use as a right-of-way and land access. The port of Mombasa is a very well-developed port. So I think there are some positives to the southern route. The other thing, from a security standpoint, you've seen security incidents in Kenya. A lot of them are up here in the Lamu area near the Somali border. So I think from a security standpoint, it's going to be much easier to build one in the south. So the bottom line for us is we don't really care. The cost of these, difference in cost is not that significant. The important thing for us is they need to pick a route and they need to work together. So right now, the upstream partners are all aligned on the route that they want. The Ugandan government is aligned with them, and we're working with the Kenyan government to get them aligned. So my goal, in fact, I'm going down next week hopefully to meet with President Kenyatta, and this will be one of the topics we talk about, is really to make sure that we keep aligned on this and that there's a solution that takes care of Uganda and Kenya. Because Uganda, at the end of the day, is really kind of driving the pipeline. They're much further along than we are. They've drilled 100 wells. They've got 1.7 billion barrels of oil. They've got development plans, some of them approved, and they are going to be producing twice as much oil as we have. So the breakdown right now is 200,000 barrels a day for Uganda and 100,000 barrels a day for us. So one can think of it more as a Uganda pipeline that has a nice Kenya spur on it. So the key for us is getting that Uganda pipeline up and running. Anyway, I think that's heading the right way. We're not going to forget about exploration. Again, this is the thing that will move our stock bigger than anything else. But certainly the last 5 basins we've drilled haven't been that interesting, and these wells are expensive. Exploration wells in new basins are generally 2.5 to 3 times more expensive than appraisal wells in the Lokajar Basin. So again, in these times when capital is limited and expensive, I think we have to start thinking, what do we get the biggest bang for our buck? And we also have to think about, what is our end game here? What is our goal? So we are drilling 2 wells right now. We're drilling the Appear well in North Cario. We've just spud the Ngoma well in North Turkana, both very interesting wells. But I think some of this stuff you see on this slide, and when we talk about the plan for this year, I think some of that we may need to push into next year. We do have the luxury that a lot of our permits have 3 to 5 years left on them, so we do have time to drill these wells. And I think, unfortunately, we probably don't have enough money in the bank, or if we have a small limited amount of money that we raise, to do both. And I think we need to focus on where our priorities. But again, we drilled Kodos, even though we didn't find an oil field there, we saw good oil shows there. So I think we're encouraged to probably follow that up somewhere in the South Cario Basin. We've just drilled up Appear. We're getting very close to finishing that well. Should be announced before the end of this month. And I think, depending on the results of that, I think we may want to follow up in that basin as well. Tausey is one that's on the potential drilling schedule. It's the one that's just the basin north of Lokajar. This is where we found all of our oil. So it makes sense that that's an interesting well as well. So I think that's one that will be thrown into the hopper of things that we may want to do. Appear is the one we're drilling now. It's a nice 4-way dip closed anticline, big prospect. Again, in the North Cario Basin. We still like the offshore. The Lake Turkana Basin is the biggest basin we've got. We're drilling this well right now in Gomo. If this hits, we've got Samaki ready to drill next. If this doesn't hit, we may elect to defer Samaki. So Samaki is a more difficult well. We have to drill that from the shoreline. This is basically the edge of the shore, and deviate it fairly deep under the lake. So again, that's a well that if it doesn't go as planned, could become a very expensive well. So I think that's one we may have to think long and hard about. Tausey, again, fairly simple prospect. If you follow up the basin, this is just basically the next one north, the next string of pearls to the north. And if we hit Tausey's a little bit away from the basin edge, but a good-looking structure. There are a number of other leads and prospects we can follow up in that basin as well. The one well we may drill this well because it's a commitment well, and again, I think that's important. None of the work program we talked about in this session are commitments other than this well. And this well, we only have 20% interest. Marathon is still carrying us for part of our interest here. So I think this is the only real obligation we've got this year. Everything else is discretion. We can take our foot off the gas and coast a little if we have to, if oil prices stay down longer than we expect. But again, an interesting looking prospect. The seismic isn't quite as good here. Again, even for you budding geophysicists, you can see just the reflectors aren't as continuous. But we do have some nice outcrops of source rocks. Those are the same Miocene source rocks that produce oil in the Lokajar Basin. So it does look interesting to us, and I think we may drill this well, if not second half of this year, certainly first half of next year. The Rift Basin area is the only one we're shooting seismic on. Again, Marathon is our partner here. They're paying for the cost of the first 400 kilometers of seismic. If we see something that's interesting, we've got the ability to put that up to 800 kilometers, but we'll be paying half of that. So once again, I think we'll have to see something fairly interesting before we commit to shooting seismic there. Again, the reason we like this area, I think we've talked about it before, nice thick shales on here, oil seeps on the lake. This is the place where the farmer came to us and said he was drilling water wells and petroleum kept coming up out of his water wells, and he said, we need help. And I said, we can help you with that. So show us exactly where that is. So we're looking to drill some water wells in the neighborhood to see if we can help the farmer out. So I like this slide because it kind of gives you a summary. This is what we're planning to do this year. So, broken down by quarter. So we've already drilled these 2 wells. These 2 wells, we're almost finished with this well. So sometime before the end of the month, we're going to put a press release out for this well and these 3 wells. We've already committed to the Gamia 7 well. We've already committed to the Agnali's Deep. We haven't done a firm commitment to Samaki or any of the adjacent opening wells. We have committed to Amasing 4 and we're building that location. But every one of these stars you see that's kind of shaded and hatched, those are optional. So the money we've got in the bank pretty much takes us through the first quarter and into the second quarter, and most of the stuff that you would call as firm. Anything that we want to do above and beyond that, we have to think about raising money in the market, which in the current market, I'm very reticent to do. I think at some point it makes more sense to just slow down and do what we can with existing funds primarily. We do have some things that don't cost much money, like the pipeline. The pipeline is just getting in and working with the government and convincing them that on selecting a route and a commercial structure. So I think that's something we want to see done at least by the beginning of the third quarter. The extended well test, we've pretty much paid for most of that already. We've drilled the wells, we've bought the equipment, so it's just operating costs to keep those operating. And they're good value add because that will make us understand the reservoir. Special core analysis, very small amount of money in the scheme of things, $2 million, and we'll be able to get all the analysis we need to firm up that reservoir. And then we're pretty well finishing now the upstream front-end pre-feed on both the upstream and the pipeline. And those are things that we need to do because those are things that are going to go into the field development plan. So what is the plan for Africa Oil? It hasn't changed. We still think the best thing for our shareholders and for our company is to bring in an industry partner. The other thing that we think possibly is going to change by the same time period is the capital gains tax. So I think we're seeing a lot of momentum to change that. The way they would change that is by putting it into the 2015 finance bill. So generally that bill goes to Parliament in June, and as like this year, it was passed in September. So you can see there's a lot of things coming together right about the third quarter. Pipeline, possible capital gains, the results of the EWTs, the results of the core analysis, and leading up to a point where we think we're in a position to put a field development plan in place. So this is the point where we think we've got this mature enough to really start showing to the big guys and taking enough risk off where we think they would be realistically making an offer for us. Of course, the thing that's not shown on here is oil price. Oil price, we hope, during this time also hits that third quarter rise again. If it doesn't, we probably need to delay our process. Oil industry is one of the worst in the world at buying when things are high and selling when things are low. And I think one of the things that differentiates the Lundins is they generally buy when things are low and sell when things are high. So we were quite happy to sell Redback at the top of the market. We sold Tanganyika at the top of the market. Actually, when we closed Tanganyika, it was back to the bottom of the market. Thank God we still closed it. But we don't see selling our company either partially through a farm out or totally until the market starts recovering. And I do think there's going to be, having been through this 4 times now, there will be a wave of acquisitions once people see they think they've got to the bottom. There's a lot of distressed companies out there. If this oil price stays, the second quarter and the third quarter are going to see massive bankruptcies here in our sector. I think those of us that can stay through. If you've noticed, the Lundins on the mining side have been aggressive lately. They just bought a gold mine in Ecuador, again, bottom of the market. They just bought a copper gold mine in Chile, what we thought was the bottom of the market. Today we saw a little bit lower bottom of the market, but I think the strategy is good. We're buying things. This is the time to buy. For those of you who have been holding Horn Petroleum for some time, I think we're gearing that up to be a vehicle that's going to take advantage of this market and start looking at some of the deals we've been looking at for the last year or two that are extremely overpriced. I think are going to start coming down to reasonable prices now. And some of the host governments who have been a little proud of their assets, door, like we were with Africa Oil. We basically built Africa Oil in 2008, 2009, during the last time this happened. So this is if you've got money and you're aggressive, this is like Christmas. This is the time to go shopping. If you don't have money and you got huge debt, you got a problem. And unfortunately, we like to capitalize on people who've had some of those problems because that's when you get your real bargains. So anyway, I know it's been a very rough year for everybody. I think there's not a company in the resource industry who would not echo this. There's been a huge disconnect of true company value and share price. There's companies that are trading at 20% discount to cash. There's companies that are trading at 30% of their NAV. So we're not alone. Everybody is suffering, and share price disconnection has happened because the market's in panic. The market doesn't know where the bottom is. They don't know what oil prices can go down to. But the saving grace for us is we've got a great project, and we will be paid for that project if we stay in long enough, and we can do that. We have the ability to stand firm, whereas a lot of people don't. So 2015 is all about survival. We will still be standing at the end of the year, and the goal for us is to keep the project moving as much as possible while diluting our shareholders as little as possible. And that's the decisions we're making now in the first quarter is what do we really want to spend and how much is it going to cost us in terms of dilution. During this time, we'll also be talking with people about mergers. We'll be talking about people with farm-ins. There's still a couple of companies that we're discussing possible farm-ins. And at the end of the day, it's all about dilution. What gets us to our goal with the least amount of dilution. So again, one of my favorite photos, this actually isn't George Foreman, Sonny Liston, but we shall overcome. And I think the strong will survive, and the weak won't in this market. And I still consider us one of the strong. So I'll let you read through the cautionary statements and the prospective contingent resources at your leisure. And I think we have time for some questions. Thank you.
Ja, om vi har några frågor så har vi mikrofon så hörs det lite bättre. Vi börjar här framme.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Hill, for being here tonight. Excellent performance. I'd like to please tell me your point of view about the risk of a enemy bid of the whole company.
Yeah, I think obviously that's always a concern. At the end of the day, it comes down to your shareholders and their ability to fend it off. Up until recently, I would say it doesn't concern me at all. We've got some core shareholders, and that no one's ever taken a Lundin company over against its will. Some of you remember somebody tried with Lundin Mining and they weren't successful. I think it is a possibility. I think if someone were to come and make a bid on us, I would hope our shareholders would see that it's probably not the right time to sell and stand against them. I also think there probably are other people waiting in the wings. The best scenario at all is a bidding war. For those who have happy memories of the Tanganyika days, when we got the Chinese and the Indians bidding against each other, they started at when we were at $15 a share, and we ended up at $31.50 a share. So I'm not that worried right now in this first quarter because I think the market's just closed. I think nobody's doing anything until they understand. Some of you saw Repsol took over Talisman, and the word on the street is now they did it 2 months too early, and now they probably paid $2 billion too much. Nobody wants to be that guy that calls it too early. I like the analogy a guy said before to me was it's like trying to catch a falling knife. You all want to catch it in midair, and the risk is you get your fingers cut off. If you stand back and let it hit the ground and go and pick it up, that's probably a more prudent move. And I think that's what you're going to see in this industry. Nobody's going to feel like they're ready to do anything. Nobody wants to be the idiot that came in too early and overpaid for something. But once they feel that bottom, and once the first couple of deals get done, again, having been through this 4 times, that's when the shark feeding frenzy starts. And we don't need oil prices back at $80 for people to start doing deals. We just need people to think they're going to $80 again. And I think that's going to happen in the third quarter, latest fourth quarter, is my opinion.
Thank you.
fler frågor här. Ja.
Yeah, what is the different options you have to raise money? Can you give me
Yeah, I mean, still farming, I think, we look at it, we'll keep going with everything. There are a lot of people offering me money today. There's, I always like to point out, if you look at our volume, we had 10 million share days in December. And our volume is huge, but for every person who sold a share, somebody's buying that share. And we've had a pretty big change in our shareholder base. Standard Life, who is a Scottish pension fund, who is not even on our register now, 7%. Janus Capital, who again was a couple of percent, is up to about 7.5%. So there are people out there who see great bargains, and I think there are people we can go to raise money. I think the more important question is, should we be raising money? There is money out there, and we can raise it, but if I were to go raise $300 million right now, that's a 50% dilution. So, the value of a company in the numerator, the number of shares in the denominator, I think we have to be very careful about raising that number in the denominator. I would rather stop spending aggressively and preserve the value in the top hasn't changed. That's, I think, the hardest thing people to understand. Our share price has gone down 70%, but the value in the numerator hasn't changed. The project is still worth what the project is worth. And we have to be careful about destroying that value by raising too much money. So money's out there for an equity raise if we want it. And we may have to take a little bit to see us till the end of 2016, but we don't have to make that decision right now. We're funded through, well into the second quarter, close to the middle of the year. But I think the other options, the biggest option is farming. I still think farming is probably the less diluted, better, for the deals we're offering people. And we're also looking at some mergers. There are some companies that are cash-rich production companies with strong balance sheets, very little debt, but with no growth opportunities. So we've talked to a couple of those guys, and they see a great synergy. They could pick us up for growth. The problem is their share prices haven't suffered as much as ours. So if you start looking at putting the two together, they would have to pay us a premium to get there. And the thing with guys with money right now, they're just sitting there hoarding it, like Midas. They don't want to give up their money just yet. And again, we probably have to wait until we see the bottom at least.
I wonder if one option could be to go to the bank and borrow some money for a short period.
The Swedish bond market was all over us last year, and I remember telling all of our guys, we're an Explorco, we don't have any production, and we don't have any cash flow. So if you've got debt in times like this, if you don't have debt, it's painful and it hurts. If you've got debt, you're finished. And I would say 15 to 20% of the companies in our space are finished. They may not know it yet. They're the walking dead. But they don't know they're dead, but they are. They'll never be able to recover. Now, the banks put these things on you called cash sweeps. So if you go outside your covenants, they can take every penny of cash flow you've got. And it's almost impossible to recover, because then you can't invest in the field, you can't do your business, and it's a slow, painful death. So I've always been debt averse personally, and with our companies, if you've got a good field, like Black Pearl is a good example. If you have a good producing field, you can take non-recourse financing on that field, and that's a way to finance it. And if we stay in this, and there is a chance, we say we're going to get a partner, we say we're going to farm out, we say all these things, but we may not. We have to be prepared to stay in. I still don't think it's the best solution for the shareholders, but if we do stay in, we can probably cover about 50% of our development costs with debt. Then it makes sense. Then we've actually got production in the horizon, the pipeline's finished and all of that thing. Then I think we can take debt. But until we're much, much closer to that end game, I don't think we take debt.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any further questions? Here? Any more questions when you have a chance here?
I should like to know how much does it cost for you to get up the oil?
Pardon?
The cost.
Cost of producing the oil.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's very pleasant in Africa Oil. Our operating costs are going to be somewhere between $5 and $6 a barrel. Our pipeline tariff is probably going to be about $7 a barrel. So we're all in about $12, $13 a barrel. So if we get producing and the oil price goes down again, we don't have to shut in until probably $15 a barrel. Now, there's a different number there about full cycle economics. You know, we're front-end capital loaded. So if the question is, what oil price do we need to develop these fields? We can probably meet minimum thresholds somewhere between $40 and $50 a barrel oil. At $60 it looks good. At $70 it starts looking really good. Anything above 80 is you know, kind of a world-class return, because our costs are low and our contract is quite good.
Ska vi se om det var några fler frågor här kanske?
So I have a question. I would like to everyone raise their hand who thinks that oil is going to recover to above $50 a barrel by the end of the year. All right, now I'm going to start putting out numbers here. Lower your hand when you think so $60. So lower your hand when you think I'm above your threshold. $70, $80, $90. Okay, I think we're all pretty much on the same page as oil price. Frankly, I think you guys know pretty much as the experts do. The one thing I've learned with oil prices over 30 years in this business is we will always be wrong. No matter what we think we know, we are always wrong. No one saw this last one coming. I've got, from when I worked at Shell Oil, I've got our price premises from 1981. And we had 3 cases. We had the planning line, which we went out and spent $9 billion on Belridge Field for. We've got the high case, and then we have the disaster scenario, the NCD case, never crude deficient. And it was only a 25-year forecast, so it stopped in 2006. But in 2006, the planning line case was $216 a barrel in nominal dollars. The high case was $320 a barrel. And the NCD case, the disaster scenario, was $169 a barrel. So even Shell Oil and the big boys don't get it right ever. But the thing that gives me heart about oil prices is that economies can't survive, particularly Middle Eastern economies can't survive on anything less than $80 to $90 a barrel. So I'm quite confident that at some point that price is going to come back into that range. It's just a question of when and how much pain there's going to be between now and then. So thanks everybody for supporting. I know it's been a rough ride for my long-term shareholders. It's been a rough ride for me as well. Any thoughts I had about early retirement have now gone back significantly. You'll be seeing me around for a while, I'm afraid.
And one last comment.
Thanks again, Mr. Hill. Please tell me, when will you be back here in Stockholm?
My guess is probably, well, I'm coming back for Capital Markets Day at Pareto in May, so that's probably the next time I'll be back.
I'm looking forward to see you again. Thank you.
All right, thank you.